Guys, it's Adam. This is Wabi-sabi podcast. Thanks so much for stopping by and checking it out. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. If you're not a newbie, if you've been around, you know the gist. This show is unedited, unscripted, freeform, on no budget. It's a one-man show. That's me, Adam Yasmin, based here in Los Angeles. This is episode number 13, I believe. And I am excited because it is a talk with an old tea friend who himself is a very old soul, fellow Chajin. Chajin is a way of saying tea person, I believe, in Japanese. We spoke last week, and I'm releasing this episode today on July 2nd because it is a new moon, and there was also a solar eclipse today in the southern hemisphere, and it is the eve of the birthday of my guest, Harold Linde. Harold is many things. He feels like a relative, kind of like a long-lost relative to me. In a past life, he was a producer and writer, volunteered for the Peace Corps, and I think produced a lot of documentaries, and has since transitioned to getting his MFA in design with an emphasis on tea at UC Davis, which he will be telling you about in this conversation. So thank you again for stopping by. If you like what you hear, please feel free to subscribe to the show. Check out the Patreon as a way to support the show for as little as $1 a month. It helps me with the base level costs of hosting the show, getting equipment, things of that nature. I believe for $2 a month and up, there are artwork gifts that you'll be receiving every year, courtesy of me, and the archive of images, photos, and digital art dedicated to the tea experience that I've been creating over the last 6 or 7 years. So check out the Patreon at patreon.com/wabi-sabi podcast. Again, I want to thank my tea sponsor, White 2 Tea, for their generosity and their badassery. In this particular episode, I poured Harold here in Los Angeles a pot of a 2002 raw puerh. It doesn't have an alias, but it is from another friend's tea company based in San Francisco. They're called Tap Twice Tea. Check them out as well. Although you unfortunately won't be able to purchase the tea that we drink anymore because there's none of it left. So, in honor of celebrating the etheric nature and of tea and existence, without further ado, here's Harold Linde. It's funny to be in this house, this flat, because it has not only given me the foundation of a home, but it's where our daughter was conceived. That's where she was born. That's where she's being raised. I never had that kind of a holistic experience of life, having grown up in my particular situation. So I've heard from, some peers or some friends, some strangers who've talked about, growing up in their family's home. It's been there for whatever, 30, 40 years. There's like that tree that they know that's in their parents' house and those kinds of stories. And it's like, I have no, my upbringing was completely different. It was always very uprooted and I don't want to throw these labels like, well, it was imperfect or it wasn't this or it was that. It just was what it was. And so to experience it now, or to experience, growing up through my daughter is like really, like she's made of this place. She's made of this neighborhood. It's a mind job.
It seems that you're very conscious of what you're cultivating here for all of you. You as a collective, as a family. Thank you.
It's a unit. Yeah, thank you. These are Miroslava Randova cups that I picked up in at Puerh, Brooklyn. Have you been there? Oh my gosh. What a great prototype for can this be recreated? It's like that kind of a location. It's so fascinating. It obviously it is itself. It really, there's only one model. There's only one in existence, and it is that place, which reflects the proprietor, who's a guy named. He introduced himself as Gripo, and he introduced me to his partner. And some of his staff were absolutely lovely, and it's like in the heart of Williamsburg. And he is also a fashion designer, so there's also an element of this space that is almost like a little workshop. And it's this amazing kind of like 3-leveled experience, not necessarily like levels as in stories, but just there's 3 layers to it. There's the on Grand Ave, the storefront, which is like, it's more like the stop and go kind of experience. There's sort of, there's maybe a wall or two of teaware, teas as well, so they can portion out teas that people are kind of stopping and taking with them. And then there's this staircase that goes below the street level, and down there is the nook of his design sort of study, like that corner with all of his he works with a lot of felt and a lot of kind of recycled felt, and then there's the grounding, amazing just the floor of the downstairs area that's conducive to having a timeless tea experience, if you really give for whoever is giving themselves the time. So it's a great place for events. I know that when Wuda comes to town, he does events there, and it's wonderful because it's such a raw, minimalist space, and because it's the downstairs, the basement level, the ceiling is probably 20 feet up. It's magical.
And is he making it work as a business as well?
Yeah, I think they've been in business for 4 years, maybe longer. So I'm sure it's evolved. I don't really know the full story, but I had several experiences there. We were in New York last summer for 2.5 weeks. So I did what I could to have repeat experiences there. Which is a really fun segue into, one of the ways that I know you, in terms of being a tea person is, like, I feel like one of the first conversations we had by now, like 4 years ago, was about spaces, about tea in Los Angeles, what the shape of that way, what's the current shape of that, what could be the future. Just constantly reflecting on that, because it's the nature of tea people to just like inquire and observe and kind of brew on something, pun intended. And from what I understand now, given your is it an MFA that you're in?
In design. So there's a what is it now? It's an initiative, and the intention is to have a global tea institute. But right now it's an initiative. So it's a looser collection of people involved, and then I'm actually in the design department working on MFA. But my focus is on designing all aspects, or many aspects, of the tea experience. So, kind of the best of both worlds.
How did you get to here? How did you get to that? What was the path to being in this program and pursuing this initiative?
By not being satisfied with what was going on in LA and trying and being frustrated and just not working. And I actually applied to out myself. I applied to 3 art programs in LA. I got turned down by all 3 of them, and then I decided to apply the next year. And it missed my awareness or forgotten whatever, but that there was this tea initiative at Davis, so I applied to Davis in the design department. And one of the great things is there are a few programs in the nation where you don't incur any debt because you get assistantships. So basically, you TA a couple classes and everything's covered. So that is really nice. And then to be also in many consider UC Davis, the premier agricultural school in the nation. And so you have this culture of a human relationship, long-standing human relationship to growing plants. And so that's the background, that's the ambient, or one of the ambient cultures. And then being in the country, it's really nice to be out of LA right now. I just need to do that as well. And yeah, ended up there, and there's a tremendous amount of freedom. The department is just the right size. And I'm a bit older than all the other students, and I'm also completely clear about at least the direction. So it's working out really well.
Would you call yourself kind of almost like a hybrid student and faculty in a way, given the prowess with which you are pursuing this kind of no? Really.
I would say less. No, although there's an interesting tension there, because I definitely have, in terms of just what conversation, I am often more congruent with faculty, but there's an interesting tension there, because I'm also there to learn, but then also there to do stuff. So our department actually doesn't have studios, but I was able to negotiate a studio in a different school across campus. So I had a studio for the year, and I built a tea space out of it. And I spent the first quarter kind of designing it and then acquiring the materials, and then the second 2 quarters serving tea to from everyone from the Chancellor and his wife to my last tea guest. Literally came at like 10 p.m. We stayed until wee hours of the morning, and then the next morning I took down the tea space. So, and that was a campus police officer, a modern day samurai who had his gun holstered as we drank tea, and it was wonderful. So,
That's amazing.
and I have a photo of. I've only seen one photo so far, but that experience and that photo made the entire year worth it. And to me, and it was. I mean, it was. Besides the symbolism, it was such an enriching and fulfilling experience for me. It's just such an interesting, present, compassionate person.
Well, meeting, as one of the old adages. Is that the right way of saying it? Like the foundation of tea is like you're meeting humanity as you have a tea, or as you have or host a tea experience. And you're always meeting different people, different backgrounds, different stories, different histories, different perspectives. I look back at a time when I was only pouring tea like publicly in Los Angeles at a variety of like art galleries and very sort of like open spaces, and meeting the types of people that I met was always nothing but an enriching experience, even if I didn't like agree with who I was meeting. That seems so timeless. That kind of a unique, I guess sort of some kind of intersection of humanity. So you've completed year one of this program.
Year one, and then year two, in the fall. I just got a grant last week, fairly sizable, to build a mobile tea space. So learning hopefully from lessons and successes from this past year, but something that's doesn't require the same commitment to real estate's very precious on a university.
Sure.
Anywhere, and so this way it's not to have it situated someplace. We're in preliminary agreement with the Arboretum. They're very interested in having this tea space for a year somewhere in this natural setting.
And then it'll move on to some other place.
Yeah.
So congratulations on getting a grant. Do you feel like talking about what the shape of this mobile experience is like?
I can't say a whole lot, only because it's not. I have some design ideas and some colleagues I'm working with. When it's further along, it isn't some ideas, but I want to make it a little more tangible first. And then the goal is to go back this summer and build it so it can be up and running for as much of the year as possible, not wait for school to start.
Right. Amazing.
And then share it. So unlike this studio I had last year, which was it was like a laboratory, really. This will also be shared with a collection of other groups, or at least open to them. It's actually a fun problem. It's like how do you have a space it's not public, but it's shared. Like, what does that look like? What does the material look like? Where do people store their gear? How does that all function?
Almost like you're creating a new system or a new template for some form of cohabitating or collective experience, and doing it within the bureaucracy.
One of the interesting challenges, I guess, is you would know this automatically, but for someone who doesn't really do tea, there's not an understanding of there's a fineness and delicacy to the teaware, and so that has to be considered in what the design is, and especially for a shared space.
Sure.
And if you don't have that experience, it just doesn't register. So that's an interesting part of the whole conversation to convey.
Or like a collectively agreed upon like ethos of like we all feel the same way about this gear or this kind of maybe being able to create some kind of base level understanding or awareness. Like, is that even possible to create that kind of broad spectrum awareness of, let's say, teaware in general? So that other people would, I don't know, maybe not necessarily have the same reverence as you would, but just approach it in the same way, I suppose. That's kind of a backwards way of saying reverence. And but just this idea fascinates me, especially like within the context of a university, because I'm in a vacuum. I've been thinking, kind of Han Solo without the resistance. Like, how would I approach some kind of either a physical or a mobile space or experience, especially right now in my life in particular, because I'm 4 years into this freelance design career, and I'm like at a standstill. I'm at a fork in the road right now, because the way that the design community, let's call it the marketplace in LA. It's the marketplace currently exists to commodify designers, like any other role, I suppose, within the tech community, into being just a sea of independence. And you have, whether it's startups or agencies or even, I guess maybe more enterprise level operations like your Googles and your Facebooks will have more, more like in-house teams of, let's say, designers or engineers, things like that. But with your sort of startup and agency level, it's nothing but a revolving door. And for someone like me who started this in parallel with becoming a first-time parent, and my ethos immediately was very clear. It was like, I want to work on a variety of projects with a variety of clients, but I want to be close to home, and I want to raise my daughter, who in the beginning was like an infant, now she's a toddler, now she's growing older, she's going to be 4. But this feeling of like I've been like a pinball in this revolving door type of or carousel kind of culture of the tech community, and feeling at odds to a certain degree, and at the same time motivated to have the kinds of experiences with other people that I'm yearning for, this being one of them. And have been focusing more on meeting people through a shared tea experience. For instance, yesterday I had the privilege of pouring for Bruce Lee Family Company and their office here in Los Angeles, and exploring the lovely connection with Shannon. So Shannon Lee is, I believe, the head of Bruce Lee Family Co. She's a friend of Pam's, and this is, I think, maybe the third or fourth time I've been invited to the office to like hold court to puerh. And in the beginning, maybe a year or so ago, I was navigating it like maybe this is like a service for teams or companies as like a team building thing or a mindfulness module or something, and kind of going beyond the fact that, look, at its core, this is a tea experience. Let me not. I don't want to forget the fact that at the foundation, I'm just a person who is exploring the tea experience and shares it in real time. And I've been reminded recently, like, don't call it what it isn't. It's really this simple. Just focus on it being that simple. And it's been really refreshing to hear that from like peers, and to pay attention to that as opposed to I'd say fizzling out of the rat race of design, trying to do that, trying that to be my I suppose really the income generator. So it's a really funny, uneven ground, but there's also something really natural about that. I mean, it just feels natural.
I'm curious what, I don't know the virtual design world, and maybe you don't know this, but how is it distinct from the film and television production world, where it's freelance based, but people raise families and have lives? It's hard, but it works. And I get a sense, I don't know if this is accurate, that there's an added difficulty in the world you're currently working in. Is that accurate? And do you know what that would be?
Yes, that's my first answer. And what I can say is, based on, I'd say, comparing the industries, tech is more of an unregulated. Tech is still in a kind of a Wild West existence, whereas film entertainment is like more unionized. There's more set rates that grow maybe year over year or something, and there's probably, because LA is LA, there's probably more entertainment work across the board. Maybe the points of entry are changing. Maybe they're getting a little bit tougher. With design is turning into a kind of like a certain kind of a gig economy existence. That's the core of what I'm getting at. You have the prevalence of what they call talent agencies or recruiter agencies who farm out to talent for startups and agencies. So I'm on the talent side, and these companies, startups or agencies, they realize we don't have to have a full-time designer or a design team in-house. Pay them full-time benefits and salaries and whatever daily snacks and things. What we can do is just, we don't even have to hire them directly. We can put out a casting call, go through the talent agency. They find the talent, bring them to us. They work on a 1099 for as little as 2 days or as long as 2 years. It's just a revolving door. So if I was 24 years old, a college grad, and was single and maybe lived with my parents or something and didn't have much of an overhead, I probably wouldn't be, thinking about it so much. But because they're because I am part of a wave of, like newer designers in the marketplace. I think people thought that um, the field would respond to the amount of talent coming in, and what's happened is the inverse. If the talent wants to bring in people full time, they want senior people with 8 to 12 years of experience. There isn't an active pool of these people. They're working. They're locked into their positions, or they're moving on to so. Yeah, I mean, the short of it is it's kind of turned into a gig economy kind of experience. And in my case, I'm wanting to having my particular kind of overhead with raising a child. It's like, if I start saying yes to working at $20 or $25 an hour, there's no it brings everyone else down. It brings it really does bring everyone else down who's in the same position as I am. So it's kind of an ethical quandary,
as well as a practical one.
In my case. So I don't know what the future is with that. I know that I've become clearer with being present in the world as a tea person, and I still like to introduce people to it, give people sort of a kind of a first time experience in a way, almost like an ambassadorship. I'm still interested in taking what I've learned as a user experience designer and looking directly at online tea companies or tea businesses or wellness oriented businesses who their only existence, their only overhead is the web or an app or something. And I'd like to, if I'm still going to do this or embody this role in the world, is to really just focus on helping them better their stories, delight their user base or their customers, things of that nature. So,
Do you think it seems to be changing. Do you think there are enough companies now? It certainly seems like a good time to be thinking in those terms.
On the one hand, I think, I don't know if there are enough companies. I know that there are definitely numerous, not just, let's say, here in California or in the States, but in other, parts of the globe, a lot of European companies. I am these days paying attention to the West Coast based, let's say US based, or even Taiwan or China based online tea companies who are entirely Western facing, and really just trying to observe, what it is they're doing, what separates them from, their equals in the marketplace. It's weird to talk about it in terms of their competition. I don't think competing is really the case here in terms of the tea world. Maybe I'm just being naive when I say that, but maybe there's a unique product, or there's a unique branding style or marketing style. The way they tell their stories differently. I'm sensitive to those things because that's the filter or the framing with which I'm understanding, in essence, architecting a digital experience. It's not necessarily building it, but it's it's that bridge between a brand or a business goal and the user's needs. So it's advocating for end users, and doing it while pleasing any stakeholder. You know, it's a funny lily pad. I'm hearing your story, and I just love the hands-onness with what you're with how you're describing what you're doing. You know, I've also had several guests on this show talk about the LA experience. Either some people who are from LA who have left, or people who are not from LA but who come through town, and what you know their subjective experience in LA is like. So I for me it's like this wonderful, like, it sounds like for me it's like I hear this story and I'm like, what a great hero's journey. Like,
right to leave and then
to leave, to try something either new or the same thing but just with a different set of tools and resources, and yeah, these are inspiring stories, you know, especially like hearing someone like, you know, let's say Colin, who has a tea company, who's had one for years, and hearing his journey of like leaving LA and landing in Colorado and being in several places in Colorado, and now like rooting in a place like Telluride, and living tea is still you know, it's still an evolving entity.
And that was where I was introduced to this kind of tea, when he and his former partner had their place, their table in their little shop in Venice. Yeah. It's been it's been fulfilling to go to a university and be clear, to be clear what the intention is, and then to be able to use a university, I think, for how it was one of the key ways it was designed to be used, you know. So not going, I mean, as an undergrad, I was completely lost. I was clueless about everything, and this is very much the opposite. To think of it as these series of these sets of resources to be applied, and then also there's the monastic tradition of a university, and so to be removed in some ways from the world and to go deep and study and also contemplate, a lot of contemplation
and experiment
on.
Yeah, and try. Yeah, what an amazing kind of, you know, like confluence of scenarios.
And also to some ways not in a rebellious sort of sense, but as our cultures are fast evolving and changing and parts dying, to suggest or experiment with some new potential forms. So I co-led a course this last quarter called Tea in the Anthropocene, and it was bi-weekly. We met once every other week, and there were no classrooms involved. I created this sort of mobile tea setup on a bike trailer, and we would meet at a different location on campus outdoors. And I would prepare and serve tea, and then we would talk about these various texts over tea. And it was very participatory and very much about participant experience on all levels. So not just intellect, but emotional, psychospiritual. And it was about showing up. Yeah. And then for the final, they hadn't been to the tea space yet, so I hadn't had that immersive experience, and I didn't tell them anything. They just had to show up, which they did. And I said, okay, we're going in, and I'm going to serve you tea for an hour. And in order to pass, you just have to remain in silence. And if you fail, you can retake it. So there's no
There's no like punitive
No.
like damage of not being silent.
And it was really fulfilling. First couple minutes, it was a little awkward,
Yeah.
and then
And then you reach
they
that
all dropped in.
collective flow
Yeah.
state. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just entrainment.
Yeah. And to be given not just permission, but actually to have an experience that was facilitated to be in presence and actually, be in oneself in the moment. There's some just the looks on people's faces.
Mm-hmm.
Made it all worth it.
Yeah. It's a unique perspective to have on others in this shared experience. You know, you're kind of like you're like temporarily the eyes of the experience, and you get to witness people in that kind of a multi-conscious kind of a state. I hadn't even really thought about that out loud until you just mentioned it. That's awesome.
We also talked about, discussed some really relevant questions and topics and paradoxes too. So it wasn't just that kind of upliftment. There were actually some really dark and difficult questions, like cell phones and conflict minerals and genocide in Central Africa. What do? You all have a cell phone. We all have cellular devices. There's slavery and blood. So what do? We were talking about developers earlier, right? And how it's easy to point fingers and say, you're bad. But this is one where we're all part of it. So like, how do you even relate to that paradox? And that was what was interesting to me. Just to even be able to start to open to that.
Becoming conscious of the what is. I mean, it goes back to an Alan Watts quote I think I read in The Wisdom of Insecurity, which was it's a different story. That quote is like, for every increase in consciousness, there's an increase in pain and suffering. You know, you have these large-scale corporations that are selling identity mixed in with devices and convenience, and yet at the root of all this stuff is plundering finite resources at the cost of human life, and intense human labor, child labor, all these things. What a paradox.
Yeah. And you can, people do send around online petitions, but that's not very functional.
Not in an echo chamber, no.
One of my favorite texts that we dealt with, and favorite text I've read in the last 10 years, is a book called Die Wise by a guy named Stephen Jenkinson. He was a
student of Martine Prechtel.
Really?
Yeah. I think we're thinking of the same Stephen Jenkinson.
Maybe.
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And just bring up our death-phobic culture.
Mm-hmm.
Which tea is a really effective medium to even have that conversation. Or that context, really.
Why do you think that? Or how have you experienced that? Not the why, but like.
It facilitates presence and awe and connection. So to body and self and others. So other human and non-human. So it's not that it allows. It can allow the participant to experience or relate to that. Where ambient culture, there's just no
right.
There's no channel to do that.
There's no channel to it, right?
No.
I haven't read that book, but I believe this is the same Stephen Jenkinson. He runs the Orphan School of Wisdom.
That's the man, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was pretty blown away. I didn't realize. I just read it last year.
Mm-hmm.
He was first he went to the Harvard School, Divinity School, and then that didn't work out so well. I mean, he graduated, and then he became a social worker and got waylaid, not by choice, more by fate, to hospice work, and I realized every person he dealt with, I didn't have a clue.
Mm-hmm.
There was no there's no language.
Mm-hmm.
One of my takeaways, and then I think it definitely was brought into class, just to even say when friends or somebody I know is experiencing somebody dying, is to actually call it dying and death, which is, he talks about how, and that struck me. Like, we don't even say that so much. Someone's passing, someone's crossing over, someone, a softer, more etheric, less direct term.
We dress it with a different term.
I have all my life until recently. I was like, oh yeah, wait, let's talk about what it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which I think tea is tea helpful for that, or am I helpful for tea? It's a great coexistence. So
yeah, it's the chicken and the egg.
Yeah. We also talked about, I'm interested in time, like our experience of time, and that's a big part of sustainability, which is inherent, but it isn't often mentioned directly. And so, I don't know, in wine a little bit, you might have vines that are 100 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But we're talking about a whole culture of trees that are hundreds, if not 1,000 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And that's access to a different way of relating to the world and to time. I don't know of any other direct, there's an everydayness to tea, which is also wonderful. It's this super elevated, special thing, and yet it's so simple. And so, unlike, say, I'm just making this up, so I don't know if this is accurate, but it comes to mind, like going to the Grand Canyon, you're at the Grand Canyon, versus if at the Grand Canyon were your backyard, you'd probably we'd be able to like sort of sink into it, and the everydayness of it would be so much more powerful.
Mm. It's
not this special vacation. It's like, oh, this is the everyday world.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know of anything else that has such a multifaceted, everyday, either individual or collective experience.
Mm.
In every culture, in many corners of history. It's also interesting to be an individual who aligns with other individuals who are developing this kind of reverence for this kind of this level of tea, in a weird, like, circling back to maybe people hundreds of years in different dynasties, different part, different. Yeah, different. What's the word here? It's good. It's like now it's like kind of tripping me up on my words. That's that's a good moment. I just think it's that the juxtaposition of this vehicle for tea, this level of tea, this reverence for tea, in modern existence, like juxtaposing it. This, it's cliche to say like this ancient experience in like a modern container. There's something poetic about it. There's something like increasingly challenging about it, and that's also the goal for me. I don't find that I do this because I want it to be easy. I'm finding new ways to relate to it right now as a parent, to a 4-year-old. A new way of relating to it as one vehicle for this podcast. For a while I was thinking, I don't know if I want to layer this on top as a foundation to a conversation, even though it's conducive for conversation. I don't want to lessen this by focusing too much on sound or perfect or these chairs versus sitting, or it's easy for me to start to trip myself up on trying to perfect something, or trying to perfect something by way of honoring, and getting just getting myself confused or hazy about it. That being said, having this in whatever form I can experience it in my modern life is really harmonizing, and that's what keeps me engaged. Whether it's easy or difficult, it's kind of beside the point. And I don't know of anything else that that does that for other people. I don't have other examples that I know of from other people. I mean, I guess going back to like, other timeless things like cooking a meal, it's now as simple as touching my phone, hitting a button, and then a meal will be delivered by another human at the door in like 25 minutes. And then I'm going to walk out the door around the corner to the farmer's market on Fridays from 3 to 7. Say hi to, the different farms that are there. Grab things, bring it back, prep, cook, eat, clean. There's a parallel there. And it's exploring that kind of, immersive, analog, non-digital, even to call it an experience is kind of, it's beside the point. It's just life, right? Cooking and eating. It's just like life. Yeah, it's also an experience, I guess, depending on the context. But it's pursuing those moments in life as an antidote to the sort of hyper digitalization or that hyper convenient digital experience. That's how I kind of harmonize on a daily basis. I was talking last week to an author and professor of journalism named Harriet Brown, who she wrote a book about her. It's like a memoir of her experience of family estrangement with her mother. And the reason I spoke to her about that is with my own experience of estranging myself from my mother. And I realized in conversation with her and over, probably a longer period of time, that I seek a certain kind of connection and authenticity and a certain level of conversation with people, friends or strangers, as a way of feeling or like seeking and getting the kind of being seen or validated or by, it's like filling the void of that I didn't get from, let's say, my parents. And finding like how it can serve me in my life, this being one example, this sort of medium, exploring this medium.
Yeah, it is a medium, I think. Coming from the media world, it's definitely a new emerging medium, or potentially emerging medium. It seems to be. With great potential, given the way things are going.
Hope so. I think so. Yeah, I've been impacted enough by so many different shows or conversations I've heard, from different podcasts, different forums, that it was inspiring enough to get this one set up and to explore. And this is really cool. You're actually conversation number 13. I think that's significant.
Yeah, there are big things to deal with too. I think tea helps, or can be a medium actually to have the difficult conversations that we're avoiding. That often appears news stories, which are online, so they're so fleeting. But things like what's the decreasing life expectancy, which, to just relate to that for a moment, when I relate to that for a moment, it's like it doesn't, given all the information I hear and all that I see, and it advances, and it doesn't make any sense. So there's something else that we're avoiding, we're denying. And this tea it can be an access way to even start to relate to that. The wind agrees.
Yeah, the wind agrees, yeah.
I don't know why. This is so random. 25 years ago, I was living just in a suburb of Washington, D.C., in a group home. And it was the 4th of July. We lived in Maryland on a creek. And the 4th of July in D.C. it's 4th of July, it's Independence Day. It's a big deal. And, hundreds of thousands of people go to the mall this fast. swath of public space to watch collectively the fireworks. And I remember, I don't know what possessed us or led us, but we decided not to get on the metro or the subway, and we stayed. We just actually walked behind the house into the creek. And as night fell and we started to hear the explosions around the Capitol, the fireflies came out, and so that was our fireworks.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow it seems symbolic in a way, metaphorical of tea, of this simple and yet in some ways more wondrous than the greatest contrivance of human invention, which has it's wonderful and has its place, but those seemingly subtle forces and phenomena that are there right in our backyard if we just go back there.
It's also funny to think about tea as a commodity and fireworks both have this, the proliferation of both come from the same part of the world.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Yeah, and actually it's funny, like this 4th, like for next week, we're going to be driving up to Big Sur for a wedding. And I look forward to having a similar kind of a sort of like relishing and nuance kind of an experience.
That's a great phrase, relishing a nuance.
Yeah. Which is funny to think of the 4th of July because it was kind of the beginning of the birth. Because Cora's birthday is the 7th. But the 4th of July in this part of the city is like one of the loudest. It's one of the most intense collective participatory experiences I've ever witnessed. To kind of like it's intense to the point where it's like, oh, okay, it's like 2 a.m. So I almost feel like the 4th is like it was really almost like what started the labor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I mean, even to reflect on it now and like thanks for starting things off with a bang. And it's fun to marvel, don't get me wrong, at sort of big and loud things, larger than life things. But more and more, I don't know if it's because I'm aging or because I'm a parent or because I'm all these things, because I look or cultivate these kinds of, I cultivate nuance wherever I can, however I can. So I look forward to what the experience of the 4th of July will be like in Big Sur.
It seems like a really good place to do the 4th. Actually. Yeah. Yeah. The crashing waves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a kind of an explosive power that exists there. Spent some time last year, about this time, Big Sur. Yeah. It's funny, it had never occurred to me before. One of the things that tea does for me anyway. And I guess it's sort of what our increasing, what to call it, reliance, addiction, with
It's a relationship.
Relation with digital reality, right?
Yeah.
And how it's easy to be taken out, right? To not be here in our bodies or what we see with our senses or experience with our senses. And it's like tea also takes me out, but it takes me out of the I'm not sure where it takes me, but it takes me to some place. This is great because I don't even have the words because I hadn't really thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it takes me to the place that most people would like to go when they pick up their cell phone, but it doesn't work. But tea works consistently over time. It's a technology. It is a technology. I call it a technology.
It is an ancient technology. I was actually one. I had a recent. I had a recent wonderful experience of hosting tea for the first time to the VFX team behind, I'll just say like Flying Lotus's visual effects team. They're called Strange Loop Studios. And when I gestured to offer the experience, especially to like, when you look at their work, you're like, wow, these are brilliant technologists and interactive people. I was explaining it as like this is augmented reality when you really think about it. It is an ancient technology, and it's funny to hear you say that because for me it echoes this sentiment I'm holding, which is kind of new for me, which is like, it basically boils down to, if tomorrow, not wishing ill on anyone, but if tomorrow some like political hoo-ha goes down, some EMP goes off and these devices stop working, or these satellites go down or something, and we don't have these things anymore. It's like, what do we have? We have our stories, we have our relationships, or our neighbors, or our loved ones, our friends. We have tea, we have books, we have instruments. Like,
And it's interesting because in some ways, as I hear you say that, what occurs to me is both, we actually have fewer, I think, collectively, we have fewer of those roles. Friends, starting with friends, like what friend means now, or what it can mean versus what there's never been one definition, but in my lifetime, it went from being something physical to probably more commonly said as something non-physical. A mustard-colored, not even a button, a virtual button that has those letters on it.
Yeah.
That is equated to somebody I've known for 30 years.
Yeah.
So there's that. Like there aren't as many, I think.
Yeah.
Of a role called a friend or a neighbor or something. And then also, like simultaneously, the apocalyptic possibility of not having a device because of EMP is more likely maybe for less dramatic reasons, but like there will be fewer and fewer jobs. That is the way things are going. Things are more automated. Things are produced elsewhere. It's not a hypothesis or a fear-based proposition. It's just, and so there'll be more people sitting with time and
each other.
Yeah, or needing a way to connect to each other.
Yeah.
To reinvigorate the each otherness.
Or just to redefine the human experience.
Yeah. I don't know what your experience has been, and I love the challenge of the language because tea means, for most people, it means a tea bag, or more commonly probably a plastic bottle in a convenience store, stand-up refrigerator. So I invited many people over for tea in day-to-day life, and most people don't understand. I get it. I get it more and more. And there's one guy I met on a couple years back on the expo line here in LA, and I invited him for tea. We just struck up a conversation. He said, "Sure." He shows up, which is kind of rare, and it turned out that he had been in the military. He'd been in Army intelligence in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and the way that he related to the local population and was able to obtain information about the situation is by first sitting down and drinking tea. So he got it as a technology. It struck me. It was just that was the technology of getting related to whoever.
It's as old. Yeah, it's almost like as old as time when you think about it.
Yeah,
I love that. Speaking of time, I can sit and occupy this space for forever, and I love it, and I look forward to continuing this conversation in different forms or in different places. As a matter of fact, we're coming through NorCal for a second wedding in the middle of August. Maybe we'll pop by if you're around.
Let me know. I
Yeah.
probably will be.
Yeah. And if not, then there's always next time. Or if you, I don't know, you're talking about building something and using your hands, and I'm just I feel like I've been craving more of that, handwork. I actually started throwing. I took 2 wheel throwing classes so far this year. I've thrown a couple of bowls. So when you say I'm going to build a mobile tea house, I held on to it until right now, but it's yeah, man, if I could ever pass through and help, put a nail to wood or something, would love to do that. That sounds so much fun. But yeah, I at this point it's given the time o' day and daughter play date.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Thank you for stopping.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Thanks for stopping.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for the delicious tea.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for checking out the conversation. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, again, please subscribe, leave a review anywhere you really would consume the podcast, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/wabi-sabi podcast. Or leave a comment on Instagram at wabi-sabi podcast. It really means a lot to receive any feedback, constructive or just celebratory in nature. And if you feel like supporting directly, as I don't really imagine I'm going to be trying to acquire traditional ad sponsors, feel free to check out the Patreon at patreon.com/wabi-sabi podcast, where you can support the podcast on a monthly basis, and there are gifts every year that come to patrons starting at $2 a month. So check that out. And again, I want to wish Harold a happy birthday and congratulate him again on receiving the Green Initiative Fund grant for the Immersive Tea Experience Lab.